Begin the current Daf Mesech Yoma Daf Memches. Begin on the last word on Daf Mem Zayin Mebez, where we are in a series of questions that Rav Papa asked on this topic regarding Chafina, which is really the topic of our parak, and also that of the Kemitza, which is related to a similar type of avodah. They're both taking handfuls of either flour or of keteris, and he asked many different questions regarding this avodah of the Chafina and the Kemitza. Shiur corresponds because the Daf of today's daf should be discussed with Tinnik ben Yehudis. Some of these we can discuss in today's daf, like we said, are these Bayra Papas, which are about the laws of Kemitza or Chafina. Some of the important terms and concepts are Garin and Mesif and Medershan. Sometimes what Chazal do is that when they have two words, like we have today's daf regarding Midam Hapar, they'll actually take off a letter from one word and add it on the other word and then expound it. So instead of the word Midam Hapar, it's going to be Dam Mehapar. So because they're taking a letter off from one and putting another one. Pigul is the concept of when you're doing that, one of the avodas, you're having machshava that it should be eaten or burned chutzas manai. Tful Yom is somebody who was tummy, but he immersed himself that day, and so he started his entire process, but he didn't have yet sundown. Lina is the halacha when you leave over a carbon past the time when it's supposed to be eaten, it becomes puzzle with lina. So to begin the current daf, I think we'll just go back just a little bit. It is not such a long daf anyway, and we did a little bit quick from the end of the previous daf. Just the questions of Rav Papa. Like we had said, there was a parentheses, a mnemonic to recall all these questions. There was a simon of Beina Binayin, Pashat, Machatz, Pazar, Chishab, Chapins Chaveri. These are all different questions Rav Papa asked. So the first question he had asked, just going back a little bit up on the Zayin Vez, was regarding, like we said, between the fingers of the keteris by Malay Chafnav. So the Gemara wanted to know what's his question, Malay Malay. What do you mean? We already said that on the Amud Aleph. So the Gemara says no. His question was when it says Malay Chafnav vehevi. So you're bringing Malay Chafnav, or the question was does Balakach. This is what Taisu was saying. He says if you're going to say that by kaimitz is possible because it says v'kamatz hakayin. V'kamatz hakayin tells you not between the fingers because it's not the kain doing the kemitza. Those granules of flour, by automatically they got between your fingers, but that's not what you shoveled into your hands for the kemitza. So therefore, maybe over there that's why it's going to be possible. But by chafina, where it doesn't say malakach malay chafnav, it just says malay chafnav, which sounds like even if it came by itself by default into malay chafnav, it's going to be valid because although it says in the pasuk malakach, but malakach there is going on the coals, not on the keteris. That's a taisis, so maybe that was the other side of the question. When it says like Dilma Balakach Be'inan, is maybe the Balakach at the beginning of the pasuk is going on the keteris too, like the Gechalim, and therefore maybe between the fingers is not going to be valid because that's not you're not taking that. That's coming by itself, or what's called the meila between the fingernails, between the fingers, and therefore that was takeaway. That was one question that Papa had of the mnemonic of the similar which is Bein Menayim. The next point Rav Papa made was what he calls the simon was pashat, that was pshitali. He says it's obvious to me that malay kamtsai, when you're taking the fistful of the flour, you have to do like people do it, which Rashi had explained. When you're taking a fistful, your hands go on the sides of your fingers are going downwards. That's how you take a fistful. Now the question, however, was Rav Papa wanted to know what happens if you take barashet ba'esav, which is you have your hand going downwards, with your fingers digging in, instead of going on the side like this, scooping up, you're taking your fingers and going down. Would that be considered derech kemitza to be a bakamatz? Additionally, I had a question of memata lamala, which was, let's say you put instead of taking like a person would usually dig down with his palm down, he actually puts the back of his hand downwards, and he then, after he sticks his hand down into the flour, now he lifts it up with his fingers going upwards towards the palm of his hand, and that's how he grabs the flour. Would that also be valid? Then another question was minat sadadin, which Rashi gives as minat sad, was again you're not doing it the normal way. Rather, what you're doing is that you're sticking the back of your hand into the flour, and the flour by itself is coming into the palm of your hand. So you're basically keeping your hand closed. You're not like doing mamata lamala, which was you're digging your hands in and then coming out. No, you're basically keeping your hands closed, and as you're sticking it in, it's coming in through the fingers. So as you're coming down, it's going to come into your hands. That was takeaway also, we didn't know what's considered exactly that it has to be the halacha of kmitza. Then Rav Papa had other questions, which also included pashat. He says it was pshitli. Says malach afna is how people usually do a chafina. Again, one's regarding kmitza, one's regarding k'taris. They're both the same. They're very similar. Which actually Taisa asks, so why do you have to say the same questions by both? So Taisa says that because, what I mean, there's derech kmitza and there's derech chavina, so not the same thing. And I was saying, even if let's say we consider derech kmitza, maybe it wouldn't be derech chavina. I mean, there's a difference how you do when you do flour or when you do k'tairis. So if we ask the same questions. So the normal way of doing k'tairis is that again you have the edge of your palm of your hand downwards, and that's how you scoop up. The question was, however, let's say you do again the same ways of Rosh Hashanah. Instead of going with your hands down, you take your fingers to dig it out like that, or you dig your hands down and you come up, or from the side. Another case which wasn't mentioned by the kmitza was because since you have to take a kmitza, you will take one handful. By the chafin, you have to take two handfuls. So instead of usually you take two handfuls, you dig your two hands together and you come out together. Instead of doing that, let's say you take separately and then you put them together. Would that also be derech chafina? That was the end of those questions. That's where we begin the current daf. Continue with the next of the mnemonic, which was actually that's actually not even on this one. That's the next one after that. So it says the Gemara Bayi as we continue on top of Memches and Aleph. Bayi Rav Papa says Davki lekaimitz b'toifnei demana. Let's say someone attaches the kaimitz. Again, we're discussing kmitza and chafina. He attaches the fistful of the flour to the wall of the vessel. The Gemara Menachos Daf Chavav Menach tells us that kmitza requires a matan kli. You have to put the kmitza into a vessel. You can't just take the kmitza, take the fistful and burn it on the mizbech. You got to first put it in the vessel, and then when you take kmitza from a vessel, you sanctify another vessel. And the question the Gemara's Rav Papa is asking is, let's say you don't put it into the bottom of the vessel. Rather, you stick it. It's dough. It's sticky. You stick it into the wall of the vessel. What's the halachos? What's the question? So toich kli beinan va'ikar, does that have to just be in the vessel and you have it? Maybe no, you need to place it inside as it normally would be, and that you don't have. In other words, when you have kli, usually the vessel contains it on the bottom. Here it's in the airspace, but it's not on the bottom. Would that qualify as Kabbalah's kli or not? So they want to take a let it stand. Somewhat type of a question. Baravashi says, Afchi lamana. Let's say you flip the vessel upside down. And a lot of times there's a concave, as this picture shows, you get those nice plastic cereal bowls, the hard ones, the ones that the Kellogg's, and the kids have it there Sunday morning, they're Rice Krispies, you wish, and then if you flip it upside down, it has that hole on the bottom. So what happens if you flip it upside down and you put it into that bottom of that vessel? What's the halacha? What's the question? You need it to be placed inside, and you have it. It's inside the bowl. Or maybe no, you need it inside the normal way, which is the right side up, not upside down. Which that's one way of question. Taisa brings a different shot that actually it's like you turn something inside out. Imagine like a jacket, you turn it inside out. That would be like you turn it inside out. What would halacha be? It says the Gemara Tikkun. It says it's not clear if that would be considered the Kabbalah's kli of the kmitza.
What did you say before that it's a dough?
The kmitza, right? It's dough, right? Depends depends which mincha, right? Okay, they turned it into flour again. Depends which one. How's it sticking to the wall? Right. Depends which one, right? When they mix it with the oil.
It's later, no?
Right, but the machvas macheshes, they already baked that. Yeah. So it depends what you did with it, right? You crumbled it then down again, and then you do a kmitza on that. So it's a different amount of how you do that. Do you mamish turn it down into a flour again, or do you fold it over like we said? So it might still have the consistency of like shtik challah or something, like a matzah. So Baruch Papa, this is the next of the simon, which Rav Papa said mochatz. So Rav Papa says maloi chafnav sha'amr. This that they said that it has to be handfuls on Yom Kippurim. So is that machukos? Is that leveled, like smoothed out, like gedushas, or is it heaping? So Amalei Rabbi Ravashi says Tashma. It says actually it's like neither one of them. This it says has to be handfuls. It's loy machukos. It's not splattered out. Loy gedushas, and it's not heaping. And it's fufos. Rather, it's rounded out, which Rashi says it means like a word of like floating, which a little bit of height. Like actually this week's parak in Pirkei Avos al dateft adfuch, because you it usually translates you drowned someone, so you're going to drown too, but it's actually floating. It's like so he found the body floating, therefore you're also going to be the same. So that's a word tafuf. It's like floating on the top. So it's like it's neither one, not flat nor a huge mound. It's just a little bit over. That's what it means maloi chafnav, the fullness of your handfuls. Now, the Gemara before it brings the next question of Papa, it gives an introduction. It's not Hassam. We're learning about the Mishnah, Mesechtes Bachar. Nishbach adam al ritzvah. What happens if you're shechting an animal, you're slaughtering an animal, and the blood falls onto the ground? You didn't catch it in a vessel. Vasafe, and then you gather it from the ground, and you put it into a bowl. It's possible, it's too late. That blood's invalid. Now let's say min hakli. Let's say you shechted the animal, you got a bowl there, you received the blood from the neck of the animal, but then it spills from the bowl ala ritzvah onto the floor. And vasafe, you gather it, which Rashi just points out that's its own Mishnah in a different parak. It's not one near each other, both of but it's a different Mishnah. Then it's kosher. So Menachem says, where do we know this from? That you need it, that it has to go straight from the neck of the animal into a bowl, but if it fell from a bowl, that's okay. You already had Kabbalah. If it falls, you can just put it back into the bowl. We didn't know that it has to go straight from the neck of the animal into the bowl. Turn around because we're looking at the Brisa. Plus says Miyikra, V'lakach midam apar. You should take from the blood of the bull. Now, what does it mean you should take from the blood of the bull? And which blood are we talking about? You're shechting the power, whatever the pasuk there is talking about. So it says the Brisa. It means midam hanefesh. When we say the blood of the bull, I mean that's the blood that flows when the soul of the animal is expiring. That's the blood of the bull. Meaning, it shouldn't be the blood of the hide, the skin. It has own capillaries. And is not from the leftover blood. It has to be from the blood of the bull. Fine. There's another drush that the Brisa makes. When it says midam apar, it means dam mehapar yikablenu. So what we're reading it instead of midam apar, it's dam mehapar. Blood from the bull should be received. Meaning it's got to get it straight from the bull, straight from the neck. And as the Gemara explains, if you would think to translate as literally the words are, from the blood of the bull. Now, what's from? From is midam afal mixes dam. Every time we say from, we always say it means not all. You got to get from the blood, but not all of it. Even some of the blood. It says, how can you say that? Rabbi Yehuda says, whoever's receiving the blood, es kol damishal par. He has to receive all the blood of the bull. Like it says the pasuk Mikra. That's kol dam apar, and all the blood of the bull should be poured to the foundation of mizbech. So elish mamino, rather what we have to infer is that mami dam apar. What does it mean from the blood of the bull? No, dam mehapar yikableno. You have to switch the dalid, the mem, from the word dam, take that away from there and add it to the word hapar. It's dam mehapar yikableno. The blood from the bull will be received, as the Gemara explains. Because Ksaver, he holds, Goyrin, we take away a letter from this word, and we add it onto the other word, Vidersion, and we expound that you need to have from the neck straight to the kli, that's dam mehapar yikablan. Now, that's the introduction for the next question of Papa. But Papa asked, and this is what this demonic was in the previous daf of Apizer, Nispazer hakatairis. What happens if the katairis spills out on the floor? The kohen gadol is walking, he trips on the branch, he goes flying. All the katairis goes flying on the floor now. What's the halacha? What's the question? So the Gemara says a very interesting question. How do you define yodai? How do you define his hand? Is it ketzaver behema dami? Is his hand like the neck of the animal? Like the katairis is like the blood. We're drawing a parallel, an equivalency. So his hand is like the neck, and then you're going to take from that ketairis and you're going to put it onto the fire. It's like burning. It's like the equivalent of the blood. So when it falls on the floor, So psula, it's invalid because it went straight from the neck, not into where it's supposed to go, went on the floor. So it becomes puzzle. Or maybe no. Maybe his hand is kikli sharis tummy. His hand is like he took it from the machta, wherever he took it from. And now his hand is like the kli sharis, like the Kabbalah. And now it's supposed to go wherever it's supposed to go on the mizbeach. So v'loipsul is if it's not puzzle. Like we said, because if it goes from the bowl onto the floor, so that's going to be valid. As Taisi Shalom explains. He says, why are we asking this question only regarding chafina, not let's say regarding the kemitza? Isn't kemitza the same thing? So he says the kemitza is like is definitely like the neck of the animal. Why? Because there's 4 avodas by the mincha which parallel the 4 avodas of the dam. Like the Gemara says in Menachas of Gimel Beis. Now, by Bakatayris, however, the question is, you don't have a kli for chafina. It's only because, like the Gemara said, it's not possible to come into the base of Mikdash without a spoon, because we said it's not possible, we said in the previous stuff, because he's not going to have to carry it like that. But it's different, you can't compare it to Kemitza, which Kemitza takes the place of the Shechita. And then you put it into a bowl, which does like Kabbalah Sadah. But over here, the hand, we don't know how to qualify it. There's no halacha on the one hand you could say it's like, it's going to be considered as the neck of the animal because he's got to still put it into the bowl, into the spoon, into the cup and bring it in that way. So he has the arms way to the cup and he spills it. So it's not necessarily going to be the same as by Kemitza, which still has to be put into a kli, and you could say that that's going to be like the shechita. Here, says the Gemara, take it, let it stand, it's not clear how to qualify this hand of the Kohen Gadol. Is it like the neck of the animal or is it like a kli? Which again it relates to that halacha that if it spills on the floor, if that's going to make a puzzle about. A similar question, which is the next of the mnemonic of Chisha Bechafinas, says Boyer Papa, Chisha Bechafinas Ketores. Let's say the Kohen Gadol has in mind when he's doing taking his handfuls of Ketores, as he's taking the handful of Ketores, having in mind, you know what? Let me burn this tomorrow, which that's a machshava pigul. He's having in mind do the haktar tomorrow. Ma, what's the halacha? What's the question? So the Gemara says, Mirmin, do we say, as we said this on the previous stuff, Yolaf malay malay mincha. We're learning Zershad from mincha. Now, ma hasim mahani b'machshava, just like by the flour offering, when you're doing the kemitza, it is effective to invalidate a machshava of pigul. As Gemara learns out in Nachas Daf Pegimel and Aleph, it says Zaysa Torah la'oila la'mincha b'gaimer etc. and it says l'shlamim. So all the kabbalas are compared to shlamim. So just like shlamim, you are mafagel and umisbagel, you could do pigul with it and it could become contaminated with pigul. So do mincha. Okay. So we know by mincha it has the halacha of pigul. So here also the same thing, just like when you do kemitza. If you're having in mind doing the kemitza, which is essentially the same like a shechita of an animal, you're having in mind, you know what, I'm going to burn this tomorrow. So the same thing should be by chafina, that when you're doing the chafina, because we have malay malay, Xer Shavu comparing chafina to malay hamach and malay chafnaf and malay kumtzai to compare the two of them. I like, or maybe not. Now Rashi asks, he says, wait a second, didn't the Gemara, when it asked the same question of Malay Malay, ask Hainu Hach? You already asked this once before. So Rashi says no. Those two questions, one we had regarding do you make a midah, can you make a measurement for the handful? And also we want to know with Beirutzin, if it's overflowing, what the halach is going to be. Those are all the same reasoning, because the question is, are you going to say, so to speak, b'chafnaf, like you say b'kumtzai? And but because they're both learned different b'kumtzai, but here about thinking in machshava pigul, that's something else. And even if you don't make the gzer shava regarding b'kumtzai, to say that has the same halacha with b'chafnaf, then maybe you'll darish in the malay malay regarding machshava. In other words, there it's exactly from the word b'kumtzai. To say, does it have to be with his klimetz, and it has to be exactly like the klimetz, not more, it's in the same word. So the gzer shava is one thing, but then in the gzer shava, what are you comparing? Those two questions are all the same thing. They're all dependent on the word bekumtzai. So you already asked it. It's hainu hach. Here, it's not about. Yeah, we're asking the same question about gzer shava, but it's not the same thing as we had said over there. There was in the word bekumtzai. they're both in the same word. Here, it would be a different idea. Just like over there, you have salt pigel, salt over here. That's a valid question to ask. And what's the halacha? If he's taking out a handful of ketairis, and he's having in mind, is that considered something to be invalidated in machshava pigel? So only Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. It says, Toshima says, I'll bring you a raya from Mishnah in Masechtas Idiyos. Mishnah says, His Rebbe Kiva. What's going on over there in Chagiga Daf Yomi is that there's 11 milas that were said what's called Chaymer B'Kodesh, that are stringencies regarding Kachim. One of them is that the vessel like Kachim combines whatever's inside of it as if you touch the whole thing. So although they're not really one contiguous thing, that's a Chaymer B'Kodesh. You touch one of the things, everything in the bowl is considered as if you contaminated. Now Rabbi Kiva adds on, Shtagira says Hasailis, the flour, V'Hakatayris, and the incense, V'Lavaina, and the frankincense, V'Gachalim, and the coals, which is Shemnugget Tful Yom. But Mitzasin, if Tful Yom touches part of it, Pasas Kul Mimad is the whole thing. Okay, so the Gemara says, so you would think to say that when the Pasal Tful Yom, from the fact that it's Tful Yom, could contaminate the Ketairis, obviously it was sanctified in the vessel with a Kedusha Saguf. Because if it doesn't have Kedusha Saguf, a Tful Yom doesn't invalidate it. So obviously it has a Kedusha Saguf. So if it has Kedusha Saguf, so Pasal Namilina. So obviously if it's left out overnight, anything that's a physical sanctity beyond its time, it becomes invalidated by being left overnight. Now, Umedalina Pasuk, for the fact that leaving it overnight invalidates it, so Pasuk the Machshava. So then the Machshava of Lina, which is really what Pigel is, should also invalidate it when you have a mind to sacrifice it tomorrow, and therefore, if Shimon Bar Ashi wants to prove to Rav Papa and answer his question to say that yes, there will be a Machshava of Pigel by the Chafina of the Ketairis. As we see that it does have this halacha of being invalidated with a Machshava of Lina, which Rashi and Tosfos discuss. There seems to be a more explicit source. Tosfos discuss that, why that's not brought as the right. But Rav Papa, another question based on this simile Rav Papa asked, and continue the base. Chishav b'chatiyas kechol. What's the halacha if, let's say, when he's shoveling out the coals, I'm not talking about anywhere where he was taking out the ketairis, right? There's two main things. He gets the ketairis and he gets the coals, and he's got to bring them both in. And anyone has a hookah knows I'm talking about. You gotta get the incense and you gotta get the coals. You gotta get, to come out and smoke. There's two things, right? So he's coming with coals and he's coming with the incense. Now we're talking about the shoveling out the coals. As he's shoveling out the coals, he's having in mind to burn it tomorrow. Chutz l'zman. Now what's the halacha? Would that invalidate the ketairis? So the Gemara explains, what's the question? Do we say machshir mitzvahs k'mitzvah? It's not the mitzvah lane, the mitzvah is the ketairis. This is just a hechsher mitzvah, it's just to be able to burn it. Do you say that the preparatory parts of the mitzvah are like the mitzvah? And it's like as if you machashav avodah, which we just said in the previous answer of the Gemara, that it's considered an avodah, and you would be able to have a psul of pigel. So to over here.
The fire is not an actual mitzvah. The Aktorah is not happening without the fire. See, the knife of a miller is not an actual mitzvah. To make the knife is an actual mitzvah. So the fire is actually
bringing a knife to the bris milah, right? That's not the mitzvah lane. The mitzvah is the cutting of the arla. That's the mitzvah.
So the bringing is the issue, but the knife is.
Right, so here the shoveling the coals. The shoveling the coals is not the etzem mitzvah. Okay. You need to have a fire where to do it. Yes. So that's like it's preparing it and setting up the stage. So would that be like the mitzvah itself?
What's the look of a regular carbon? Mitzvah?
So let's say what do you mean by regular carbon? Oh yeah. It doesn't seem to be a question specifically by ketairis. It seems to be a general question regarding machshir mitzvah, would it have the same halacha like the mitzvah itself? Or would it not? Now, interestingly, Rashi says another version of the Gemara's question. He says, the first version of the question was saying, are you going to invalidate the ketairis by having machshava on the kachalim? The second version, he says, is no. If you're having in mind when you're shoveling the coals, will that invalidate the coals with that machshava from being able to burn on the coals themselves? Meaning, we know that Lina invalidates the coals. How do we know that? From the fact that there's a psul of tful yom, as the Mishnah taught. The question we want to know, however, is the shoveling itself considered an avodah to invalidate a machshava? And when it says machshir mitzvah, is it a mitzvah or not? In other words, just like when you have your machshava by the chafina, that will invalidate the ketairas, essentially the equivalent of chafina by the coals is the chatir. Well, that invalidates the coals. So we know the ketairas, but what will invalidate the coals? That's the two different versions. Are we invalidating the ketairas? Because it's part of that hechsher mitzvah of the ketairas? Or actually is the question about what invalidate the coals? So we want to take a look, it's not clear the halacha is in that case either. Now the Gemara continue with another question, which is going to bring a raya from our Mishnah. Ba'imene mirav sheshes. As from Rav Sheshes, halacha transporting the blood, bismol, with the left hand. Ma, what's the halacha? So as Rashi explains, we know regarding Kabbalah, receiving the blood, Zrika spraying the blood, which it says has to be done with a kohen. That we know for sure. Wherever it says what's called etzba and kuhuna, that's to be done with the hand and it has to have a kohen, that has to be with the right hand. The question is, but halacha doesn't ever say explicitly in the Torah that you have to do a halacha, which is one of the four avodas of the matnas dam, of transporting it. Now, for the fact that the Torah says Kabbalah in the wording of halacha, like it says ve'krivui, which really means Kabbalah Sadam, so the Gemara Chagigas of Yadav learns that it's an avodah, but it never really tells you straight out that you need to do halacha. It says ve'krivui, which means halacha, but really what it's trying to tell you is Kabbalah. So it's telling you Kabbalah, halacha, as we know. But the question is, using the left hand, you could say is not possible because it never really says explicitly that you need to have a kohen by the halacha. So what's the halacha? Could it be with the left hand or not? So Rav Sheshes said to them, it's in Nisuah. We learned this in our Mishnah. Why? Our Mishnah says clearly, not la samachta b'minoi. He takes the pan of the coals in his right hand. There's a kaf b'smailai. He takes the spoon of the incense in his left hand. Obviously, the avoid of halacha, which is transported in the ketairas, is kosher with the left hand. Fine. He answered the question. The Gemara asks, "B'nifsh l'hu mahad it's not." But why didn't he bring a raya from a Mishnah Masechtas Tamid, which it would be a better raya, because there the Mishnah is talking about the actual carbon itself. Here it's part of the ketairas. It's not a carbon that we have the halacha of matnas dam of halacha. Why didn't you bring a Mishnah Masechtas Tamid that says haregel shoyimin b'smoil when they're transporting all the karbanas, meaning all the limbs that are cut up in different pieces? So there's a whole 12 kahanim. They're all bringing it to the kevish, to the ram. And we say that one of the kahanim, he takes the right hind leg in his left hand, and this is talking about the person who is bringing up to the ramp the head and the leg, which he receives from the one who's dismembering the animal. He takes the head in his right hand, and he takes the right leg in his of the karbatam in his left hand. Ubeis oira luchutz, and the skin of the animal sticking at the outside, meaning to say the place of the incision of the cut is facing towards the kohen, just makes it more beautiful. You don't want to have the exposed part facing outwards. You want it to look nice. This place that's covered with skin is sticking outside. But one thing we see is that the leg of the animal that he's doing halacha on is on the left side. Why didn't you bring a right from that Mishnah? So if we had brought a right from that Mishnah, I would have said, when did we say this? Is halacha d'le ma'akv kapara? That would be by the transporting of the limbs, which is not ma'akv the kapara. Kapara of a carbon is only with the blood. And if you don't even sacrifice the limb at all, it's going to be kosher. So maybe over there, halacha is not so kosher. But regarding a transportation of something that's ma'akiv the kapara, like over here by the ketairas, would not be kosher. It's on the left hand. Mashallah, that's being right from our Mishnah. Even by ketairas, which is ma'akiv the kapara, you see it's kosher even with the left hand. But the Gemara continues at the top of the Testament out. Amazing. The Gemara asks Rav Sheshes from the following brisa. Remember, Rav Sheshes said that it's kosher to do halacha with the left hand. So the Gemara asks, the brisa says, zar, a non-kohen, ba'inen, and someone whose relative died that day, shikr, someone who's intoxicated, which Tosfos explains exactly what is the case of shikr, ubamum, it's someone that's a blemish kohen, which all of these are learned out from Sukkim in the second paragraph of Tezayim and Alta, and if they do that avodah, they're machal da avodah. So whether it's b'kabbalah with receiving the blood, u'baylach or transporting the blood, u'bizrik or spraying the blood, either way, pasul, it's going to be pasul. Now, b'chein yoshev. Now, the same thing applies to someone who's sitting, because the pasul is you have to have lamed l'shar to be standing doing avodah. B'chein small pasul. doing with the left hand is puzzle. Now, what did you say? You said that halacha is puzzled by all these things, and one of them is smile. So you see, halacha is puzzled with smile, says Gemara, Tufta, it's clearly a refutation of Rav Sheshes. Now, Tais Yisham addresses, but what do you do with halacha of Mishnah? Didn't he bring a raya from our Mishnah that's kasher b'smol? Says Tais Yisham, no, it's no raya from our Mishnah because lo yafsha, and you have no option. You have to take one hand mit the linke hand. Right? But when it is possible, then it's going to be possible to use the left hand. But the problem is, says the Gemara, but the problem is, Rav Sheshes who the Eisva. The problem the Gemara has is Rav Sheshes himself, he brought this brisa to the interpreter of Rav Chizda, as the Gemara is going to quote right now, which obviously he knew this brisa. So how could he have tried to initially say that it's kosher to do halach with the left hand, and then they asked him for this brisa, du allein sos gefragt mit der brisa, as the Gemara brings. The Amalei Rav Sheshes Lamoy Rav Chizda. Rav Sheshes said to the interpreter of Rav Chizda, his mouthpiece, Rav Chizda, frag from Rav Chizda, ask Rav Chizda, halacha b'zama. What's halacha? Could a non-kohen do the halacha? As we said, it doesn't really ever say in the Torah that halacha has to be with a kohen. We don't even know halacha is even avoid it. It says vekrivu, which sounds like bringing closer, which is halacha, but it doesn't really say. It really means kabbalah. So could it be with a non-kohen? Could halacha be done with a non-kohen? So Amalei, Rav Chizda said to him, sure, it's kosher. Umikra misayeni, and the pasuk supports me in Daf Yomi that a non-kohen can do the halacha. Why? It said in the pasuk, "V'yishchatu hapasach," they slaughtered the korban pesach. V'yizuku hakahanim, the kahanim they sprayed the blood miyadam from their hands. For whose hands? From the hands of the shachtim. The shachtim was zara. So what happened? What happened is the kahanim did the kabbalah like they have to do. Then the shachtim took it back from the kohen, and they went and they transported it to the kohen that's going to spray the blood, as the pasuk says. The Kohen who sprayed the blood got it from their hands, from the sheichtim. Levim, Avshitim, and Levim were skinning the animal. So you see clearly that a zar could do the halacha. The sheichtim who were not Kohanim, they were bringing it to the Kohanim who were doing the zrika.
Was the territory allowed for a non-Kohen?
What do you mean?
Was that place allowed for a non-Kohen Azor to walk in that place?
So yeah, I mean, this didn't have, this
How
was
could
in,
it possibly happen?
because this wasn't, this was, what was this, in Shiloh?
But even in Shiloh, there was a Mishkan, there was a territory where that was only allowed for the Kohen.
What was that territory? Because there are certain places a zar could go, right? There's Ezras Yisrael, and there's Ezra, right? So there's places that they could go, where those areas, I guess, depends.
Yeah,
Right.
but there was a...
What was the
To the Mizbeach.
Right, so I'm
When
saying
they walked
to-
in, were they allowed to go all the
Could
way
be,
to
could
the
be,
Mizbeach?
could be, maybe, yeah.
Bowl with the long handle.
What?
Bowl with the long handle.
Yes, exactly where they were, but they didn't have the same parameters of that of the so Akapanim that you see that a zar could do the halacha. Now Moshe Rav Sheshes had asked, and this is the problem. Himself, he asked on Rav Chizda from the brisa, from a different part of the brisa, but he asked from the same brisa, zar, a non-kohen, v'oinen, and some of those relevant that day, and shikin, and someone that's drunk, ubamom, and some of those blemish, but kabbalah, receiving the blood, ubahilacha, and transporting, ubizrig, and spraying puzzle, v'chein yeshiv, and also be sitting, v'chein small, and left hand puzzle, me puzzle. So he was asking for the fact that you see that a zar is puzzled by halacha, because that's what it says in the brisa. So he asked Rav Chizda, how could you say that? But the problem is, in that brisa itself, it says the left hand is also puzzle. So how could he have said that the left hand is going to be kosher? So the Gemara Basa de Shama, you're right, after he heard the brisa that they had asked on him, when he tried to say the left hand is kosher, then he himself went and asked it to Rav Chizda. So you're right, he was corrected from the brisa. Now he knew the brisa, and then he asked it, but you're right, the story was in that chronology that he at first thought he didn't know the brisa, and he thought the left hand is okay, and they said, straight in the brisa not. And then when Rav Chizda happened, so then he said also, obviously Zara also not. Now the problem is, but Rav Chizda Krakama, what do you do with the pasuk of Rav Chizda? Rav Chizda brought a pasuk in Daf Yomi that showed that halacha is kasher b'zar, because it went from the sheichtim to the kohen who was mekabel, and then it says that the kohen who was spraying the blood, they got it from the sheichtim who were not kohanim. So obviously they did halacha. I thought halacha b'zar is possible. So come on, the oven ma'aseh itztava. We're talking about where they functioned as a platform, meaning the ones who received the blood, what they did with it was that they put it onto the hands of the shachtim, And the shachtim, they didn't bring it any closer to the mizbeach. They just sat there like a platform, like someone who's just stationary, and therefore it wasn't a problem because they didn't do any halacha. So then the Kama who did this week took it from their hands, but not because they brought it near. And there's no difficulty in the pasuk. A zar is possible, the smile is possible to do with the halacha. Something is discussed in today's daf in Yoma Daf Memches. We continue with these questions about Papa. One of the questions was, if let's say you stuck the kaimitz into the wall of the vessel, is that considered putting it to the kli? Also, let's say you turn the vessel inside out or upside down, and you put it into that concave, is that going to be considered hanochanically enough? Additionally, we said that when it says in the term alechafnaf, it means tfufais, it means like just a little bit rounded. We said when it says in the pasuk "Melochem midam apar," first of all it means midam hanefesh, taking the blood of the animal. Also, actually you read it dam mehapar yikablenu. You actually take the mem of midam apar and you switch it to the next word, like we say gurni masifim b'dershin. And the reason why you have to say that is because you can't read it simply as blood from the bull, because that would sound like only some of the blood. And Allah you need all the blood. Sometimes you have to read it the way we said. Now that was what led us to the question of, let's say the Keter spills out from his handfuls. So the question was, how do we qualify his hand? Is it like the neck of the animal that would be puzzle? Or do we qualify it as like the kli, which the Allah is, if it spills from the kli onto the ground, it's okay, you already have your Kabbalah, you can just gather it together. That was a question that we didn't answer. Additionally, we want to know regarding machshava of pigul, when you're taking the handfuls of keteris, do we learn out maloi from mincha, just like by mincha there's a psul of avodah by the kmitza, so too you would say by the chafina of the keteris, or would you say not? Now the Gemara brought a raya that it would be possible, because if you say that the keteris from the mission sets it is becomes possible by tful yoim, obviously then it has kedushas aguf, because else it wouldn't become possible with tful yoim. Oh, so then it should be possible lina. Like anything has Kedusha Aguf. Oh, then it should have the Machshav of Lina, which would add a pigel. Then the question was, what's with, let's say, one step more of a Chiddush? Not when you're shoveling out when you're taking out the handfuls of the Keteris, but you're shoveling out the coals. Would that Machshava invalidate it, which two versions of Rashi, the Keteris or the coals, do we say that the Machshir mitzvah is like the mitzvah itself and would be Psul and Dalvayim? And then we said that regarding halacha with the left hand, first we thought to bring a raya from our mission that's going to be kosher. Maskan, the Gemara says, no, it's going to be possible, just like we brought a raya regarding zar, and we have a pasuk in Daf Yomi that seems to say that they took it from, that the Kama doing the Zrika took it from the Yishachtim, which was zar. And we said, no, they did a Maisa Itztava, they're just sitting there in one place, and they didn't do any halacha, and therefore that's why it was okay. Thank you to any time for hosting us.